The first overall selection in the 2023 NHL Draft belongs to the Chicago Blackhawks.
It was a huge night for the Chicago Blackhawks, a huge night for Chicago Blackhawks fans, and a huge night for Chicago sports fans, as now the number one pick once again is heading to Chicago, this time in the NHL, as the Chicago Blackhawks will select number one in the 2023 NHL Draft. That's right, the ping pong balls fell again to the Chicago sports fandom, and this time a generational talent has the chance to end up at the United Center. Only the second time in franchise history the Chicago Blackhawks will be drafting first overall, and the only other time was in 2007, and with that pick, the Blackhawks selected Patrick Kane. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Sports Cubicle. I'm Mike Mercado, Paul Chivari, Devin Tingle, and the marvelous one, Dan Marver, throughout the entire show. But I wanted to get into this. This is from Charlie Remuliotis, a Hawks insider over at NBC Sports Chicago. And the consensus number one overall selection this year is Connor Bedard, who could change the life for the Blackhawks. He is a generational talent and had a historic season in the Western Hockey League, where he racked up 143 points, that's 71 goals and 72 assists in 57 regular season games, and 20 points, that's 10 goals and 10 assists in 7 postseason contests. The 2023 NHL Draft will be held on June 28th and June 29th at Bridgestone Arena in Nashville. What a great place for the Blackhawks to get themselves a generational player in good old Nashville, good old rival Nashville. The Blackhawks are currently slated to have 11 picks, 2 firsts, 4 seconds, 2 thirds, 1 fourth, 1 fifth, and 1 seventh. That again comes to us from Charlie Remuliotis from NBC Sports Chicago, Hawks insider, after the Chicago Blackhawks will now be drafting number one overall as they won the draft lottery in the NHL. And you know, this is an interesting story all around, and we'll be talking about it on the Sports Cubicle, Sports from the Couch, with the entire gang, with all of you. And there's a lot of emotions that go into this. Obviously, as a sports fan, you're excited. Obviously, as a Blackhawks fan, if you're somebody my age, older, younger, whatever, if you were around for the 60s team or the 2010s team winning Stanley Cups, you know this city loves the winner, the atmosphere, the vibes. And to see that it might be coming to a point now where not just a great player, not just like a consensus number one overall pick, but a generational number one overall pick fell into your lap. And I think for a lot of Blackhawks fans, for the tanking, which I really want to concentrate in just a second on for this discussion, but also the entire Kyle Beach situation, watching the team being dismantled, all the nonsense in the front office with John McDonough behind the scenes, and obviously rocky words over the last few years. For all the good, for all the fun we had, there was a stain on this Blackhawks team. And there has been a shedding of the skin, if you will. And to see it kind of not come full circle and a rebirth, a chance to amend a bunch of sins that you really can't be forgiven for, but you could acknowledge and move forward and not make the same mistakes, and teach these next generation of young fans and young men on your team to not be like that. I think this is a great opportunity for this team, and it's a great chance that brighter days are ahead for the Blackhawks. So I get all the emotion behind it. And I know we're excited about it. I know the NHL's excited, but I mean, look at it. The fact that you have Bedard not ending up in Columbus or Anaheim. And let the conspiracy theories fly. And I'm all for it because Chicago ended up on the right side of it. I think it was David Hall mentioned, if you had an 11% chance of rain, would you bring in an umbrella? Probably not, right? Well, that's how much the Blackhawks had of a chance to winning the number one overall pick, and they did it. So, you know, I'm just throwing the vibes out there. If the Bears have done it, and now the Blackhawks have done it, hey, Chicago Bulls, Victor Wembanyama will look really good on the west side as well. But let's get into the tanking talk, right? Because that's all the fun stuff. We'll have plenty of time to know what's gonna happen. They're not trading this pick. This isn't like the Bears, where, yeah, the Blackhawks need a lot. They're a bad team, and through free agency, maybe through trading some of these assets, they could get their goalie that they need, and they could build around this kid, because now the timeline has changed. Now everything has changed. It's how you go after and rebuild this team because you have Bedard on your roster. But when you have 2 firsts, 4 seconds, 2 thirds, a fourth, a fifth, and a seventh, You could build around. You could build your team. You have the opportunity to have guys consistently coming up from the minors, from the lower tiers to your main roster, while you have Bedard up on the NHL Blackhawks main team in the United Center doing his thing, winning Rookie of the Year and being a showcase. But you only get to that point by tanking. And here in Chicago, I don't believe necessarily that any team should be tanking in this aspect. Tanking only works if you're willing to go all in, be transparent, and you get lucky. But if that's not the case, then there is no excuse for any Chicago professional team to not be invested both financially and with your farm system, with prospects. Your scouting should be on point. You are not mid-level, lower tier. You're a major market on all aspects. I've mentioned this about the White Sox, as they get brought up all the time. You may not be a top 5 team in MLB when it comes to salary cap, or want to play that game with the Mets and the Red Sox, Yankees, Padres, whatever. But you should always be the number one team when it comes to spending and adjusting your roster, fixing your roster in the AL Central. Same should be said in the NHL if you're the Blackhawks. If you're going to go all in on tanking, you got to be transparent and you got to do it right. And they did. And it's going to pay off for them. In spirit, yeah, I don't know if I love the tanking in sports. But when it works, it works. And in this case, now you have the guy. Now it's up to this front office to see what Kyle Davidson does. Because the easy part is over. You know who your number one pick is going to be. Can you put a roster around him? We just saw with Ryan Poles and the Chicago Bears. They're all in on Justin Fields. With that number one overall pick, they made sure to support the guy that they're all in. The most important player on their roster, they have now invested and gone all in on. They got DJ Moore. They got his offensive lineman. They got a bunch more assets to add to this team. The Blackhawks now have to do the same. And you only do that if you do the tanking right. But you can lean on it. You can't rely on it. And I'm talking about all the other teams, especially the lower tier teams, that for a lot of them, they feel this is the only way they can function. Or that's what they sell to their fan base, that's the only way that they can function. But the truth of the matter is, this is the last resort to do something like this. Because you have to tear the whole thing down and be willing to, from the bottom of the foundation, rebuild it. And there are growing pains. And there is frustration. And there are some bad moments. But you have to be willing to do it. And it has to be able to pay off. And if it doesn't, then you have to be able to adjust and make new plans. Have a new strategy. It worked out for the Bears so far. It definitely has now paid off for the Chicago Blackhawks. But it's an interesting philosophical debate. A moral debate for fandom. The tanking. And while we are ecstatic here in Chicago, it could have been really bad. This could have been they've fallen off of the top 4, the top 3, maybe as a force, right? Like they would have, even if they didn't get Bedard, the chance of getting the kid from Russia. Like there is this universe, this multiverse that it didn't work out for the Blackhawks, that it didn't work out for the Bears, that Lovie Smith didn't save Chicago in this NFL draft. So while here in Chicago, we are going to celebrate, and season tickets are selling through the roof, and they've already made like $2 million and 500 packages and all this craziness. It worked out for the Blackhawks. That doesn't mean it's going to work out every single time you tank. So we will celebrate now, but this is one of those conundrums that Fandom is going to talk about for a long time. While we'll have that debate here in Chicago, we will be enjoying possibly a generational talent, somebody who could change the fortune of the Chicago Blackhawks, as the Chicago Blackhawks win the NHL Draft Lottery and will now be picking number 1 in the 2023 NHL Draft, looking to get the number 1 overall consensus player, Connor Bedard. We want to know your thoughts. We're all over social media. Make sure you leave a comment down below if you're watching us here on YouTube at Sports Cubicle. And of course, wherever you get your favorite podcast at Sports from the Couch. And we want to give a huge shout out to our friends over at Sheets and Giggles. You thought we were sleeping well knowing the Blackhawks got the number 1 overall pick. That was doubly goody sleepy over at the Mercado household, because we have those Sheets and Giggles eucalyptus bedding and sheeting and and it is amazing. And you could get 15% off your order by using promo code The Sports Cubicle, sports from the couch. Shout out to our friends over at Sheets and Giggles. We got a lot left here on the Sports Cubicle. The Chicago Blackhawks will be selecting number 1 in this year's NHL Draft. It's the marvelous one, Dan Marver. It's Devin Tingle. It's Paul Chivari. I'm Mike Mercado.